The 2025 NFL Draft quarterback class might be historically weak, but even in a down year, there are future stars and inevitable busts. The debate has been heated, but today we're cutting through the noise and we're ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in this class. We're starting up our positional rankings, and the first up that we're doing is quarterbacks. The way that we will do all of these position rankings, we are going to break up the top 10s into tiers. We're going to have various tiers to better describe these prospects, and we're going to share with you insight on why these players landed where they did. Ryan and I came together. These are consensus rankings. I shared my rankings. Ryan shared his. We put together a median score. Ryan appreciates that I used the word median, him being a former math teacher. He just lectured me on it. And we created a consensus ranking for how these guys are going to be placed. Let's start with tier 3, Ryan, which is the backup tier. Guys that we think are likely to succeed as backups. Doesn't mean that they can't start, but they're going to be able to carve out roles as a backup quarterback on a team because they have all the tools that you look for in a quality backup quarterback. Starting at number 10, we've got Max Brosmer from Minnesota. Number 9, we have Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. Number 8, Kyle McCord from Syracuse. Number 7, Will Howard from Ohio State. Number 6, Dillon Gabriel from Oregon rounds out tier 3. Ryan, your first thought on this grouping? We've got a lot of recognizable names that had tremendous seasons in college football this past year.
Well, I think that when you're talking about potential backups, you're always talking about more the floor than the upside conversation. As we kind of move up further in this list, we're going to talk about guys that have bigger tools, guys that maybe could develop into starters long-term in the NFL. This is more, you see sustainability, you see the floor, you see dependability, you see those things that kind of go unnoticed by a lot of casual fans, but getting the ball out on time, being accurate with the football, making sound decisions. Like, that's kind of this tier for me, Joe. I think it's fascinating to look at for this, especially when you talk about Will Howard and Kyle McCord back-to-back, though. Kind of like a little interesting storyline is that obviously they both have played for Ohio State. Kyle McCord was kind of run out of town after the 2023 season, and then Will Howard comes in from Kansas State. Just kind of interesting to see those guys paralleled next to each other and kind of different skill sets, but the uniqueness, I think, isn't too much where they are going to play much different roles in the NFL level. I still think they still fit into this bucket, even though they're a little bit of different players. But I wanted to talk a little bit, if we can, because I thought that was just interesting. Dillon Gabriel at number 6. I thought I was going to be a little bit of an outlier comparative to you because we didn't check each other on these rankings beforehand. We literally just dropped them off. Like, here's my rankings, my top 15. Here's the ranking that you had. And when you average those players out, Dillon Gabriel came out at number 6, which is kind of interesting for some people because I think they're going to look at that and say, we're yelling about floor in this tier. We're yelling about upside as a backup, right? Like that really dependability aspect. But then we throw in a 5'10" plus inch quarterback in at number 6. Like, kind of interesting when you think of that. Dillon Gabriel is in a tier where we're talking about dependability, and he's the highest in that tier, despite he has some outlier physical traits, being a little bit of a shorter player.
I had a 5th round grade on Dillon Gabriel, and I had 5th round grades on Kyle McCord and Will Howard, a 6th round grade on Riley Leonard. I was really pleasantly surprised by Dillon Gabriel's film. I was fully prepared to be like, he's too small. I'm just going to kind of drop him off after I watch him and put him at the very end of this list because he doesn't have the requisite tools. But the biggest thing that was surprising for me, and why we often talk times so much about size, you would worry that Dillon Gabriel has no juice in his arm. And he actually surprisingly is able to drive the ball pretty well downfield, and he's got some pretty good deep accuracy. That was what I wasn't prepared for, and I think that the reliability for him and the consistency, also seeing how Bo Nix translated from Oregon's offense to the NFL, I'd feel pretty good about Dillon Gabriel being my backup quarterback. Kind of like Case Keenum, who's not a very big player, who was really decorated in college and got a couple opportunities to start, but has lasted for a very long time in the NFL because he was smart enough, he had the anticipation, he had the accuracy, he had all those things. I'm not saying that Dillon Gabriel goes on to become this, Ryan, but I would go as far as to say that I think that Dillon Gabriel reminds me a little bit of Brock Purdy being overlooked coming into the league, where super undersized. There's not a lot of reasons to buy in him on a prospect that if he maybe gets a shot and he gets to start and then suddenly he's earning more and more opportunities to play, that would not surprise me in the least.
Do you want to hear my comp for him? I have a fun one. It's a fun comp. Seneca Wallace. Do you remember Seneca Wallace? You're probably a little bit
Yeah.
young for Seneca Wallace. He used to back up Matt Hasselbeck in Seattle. He was a dynamic athlete, kind of dual threat quarterback, though, at Iowa State when he was coming out. I think just Dillon Gabriel brings so much just good to the table, right? Like, yes, he's a smaller quarterback, but he throws with anticipation, about as much anticipation as anybody in this class. He's generally pretty accurate, and he's a good athlete as well. Like, we can't kind of skate over the fact that he can create some things outside of structure. You know, my favorite thing about him, though, which is why I think that he ended up grading out as a 5th rounder for me and a potential backup long-term, is that I also think that Dillon Gabriel is one of the best in this class as far as working against pressure, right? Like, there's some guys even in this tier that when pressure comes, that's when their game really takes a nosedive. And naturally, any quarterback that faces pressure is going to be a little worse against pressure than they are without pressure. Like, that's just general conversation, right? But for Dillon Gabriel, he maneuvers and evaluates pressure pretty dang well comparative to most players in this class. So I think that he has kind of that cool calmness to him on top of being a good athlete and having enough juice in his arm to matter. So yeah, I ended up liking Dillon Gabriel a lot more than I thought I was going to. I thought, again, I was going to be an outlier on him, but I do think that he brings a very sound floor to the table.
Tier 2 is quarterbacks that have developmental upside, guys that likely are going to be backups, but have various traits that could help them earn a starting job, meaning that these are 2nd or 3rd round picks at the end of the day. Maybe there's a potential for any of these guys to sneak into the end of the 1st round because this quarterback class is so awful. At number 5, we have Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss. Number 4, we have Tyler Shuck from Louisville. And then number 3, we have Jalen Milroe from Alabama. My eyes immediately go to Jalen Milroe because I think you and I are in agreement here. If we're taking a guy for a developmental upside sake on day 2, I'd like for that guy to have the tools to be an upside type player.
Well, let's get one thing out of the way immediately. I would not take any of these quarterbacks in the 1st round. I just wouldn't.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
There's a possibility that someone will, right? Like, we're being predictive. It wouldn't be shocking if an NFL team decided to draft Jaxson Dart in the late 1st round or draft Jalen Milroe in the late 1st round. Like, it can happen, right? But for me, these are day 2 quarterbacks. And what gets me excited on day 2 quarterbacks, Joe, is not many people talk about the 2nd or 3rd round quarterback that didn't end up panning out, because that is still a low investment for a very important position, right? Like, you can take gambles and swings on quarterbacks on day 2. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you took the swing. It's okay. And if I'm taking a swing, I'm still taking a swing on elite traits, which is why Jalen Milroe is number 3 on this board, in my opinion, because if he goes to the right situation and you have an offensive coordinator that can be creative, that will utilize his legs, that will utilize his deep throwing ability, and try to harness the little parts of his game, right? Throwing on time, being a little bit more accurate to short and intermediate, having his footwork be a little bit more in line with his upper body. If he can do those things, then he can become probably at least a low end starter, maybe an average starter, though. I mean, like, he has that upside to him just based upon his athleticism and his traits. But again, we're not sitting here saying Jalen Milroe, day 1 starter. Like, no, this is a kid that needs to sit. He needs to be evaluated. He needs to be developed. He needs to be in the right situation. But if he lands in the right spot, though, there is upside to develop, which is why he was number 3 over the other 2, in my opinion, on this ranking.
I keep circumstantially comparing him to Jalen Hurts. It's not a player comparison, but I really think that Jalen Milroe, if he goes to that right situation where he gets on the field early as a gadget player, they use him as a runner, they give him a couple of simple read situations where he does get to throw the ball just to keep defenses on their toes as a rookie. And then maybe he starts to chip away at getting more opportunities because he's showing development and improvement in practice. Out of any of these guys, Milroe has the best chance of becoming a quality starter. Shuck and Jaxson Dart, I think, are a lot less off in that conversation point. That, like, Dart, we've discussed, his tools are just not good enough to be a quality starting quarterback. At the very least, he's a below average starting quarterback. And Shuck is just so old that it's unlikely that he's going to, like, really get that shot until he's 20, 27, 28 years old. Moving over to our tier 1B. So we had to separate tier 1 into 2 different groups because it was so difficult and just didn't make sense to put Cam Ward and Sheduer Sanders into the same group. So tier 1B is considered an average starter, and that's where we place Sheduer Sanders, a guy who is good enough to start for a long period of time in the NFL, but won't really ever ascend into being a premier top 5 quarterback. He just doesn't have the traits that you look for in elite quarterbacks, but he does have the IQ, he does have the intelligence, and he does have the accuracy to go with it.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to about Sheduer Sanders that's in the know, that's been able to sit down with him on the league side and been able to talk to him, he is a very good young man. Good character reports that come back, and he's sharp, right? And that's a big thing about this quarterback position is we talk about the physical traits so much, and then we lose sight of the mentals, right? Like the mentals matter so much. The ability to read defense, the ability to be a leader of men. Like those things, the intangibles matter so much, and we don't talk about them nearly enough. I think that Sheduer brings good intangibles to the table. I think the part that gets him a little murky as far as like upside on the NFL level is the tangible stuff, right? The arm strength, the athleticism. He's very NFL average in both of those areas, maybe even slightly below average in both of those areas as well. So I think that there's a limitation to him being a legit high-end starter in the NFL. But if you told me that Sheduer Sanders eventually becomes a average NFL starter, somewhere between 10 to 16 best quarterback in the NFL, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think that he has that type of upside to him because he does enough well, but I do think that there's a little bit of a cap on his ceiling, which is why I personally was not comfortable putting him in a top tier with a Cam Ward, because I do think there are some limitations to that ceiling comparatively to what Ward brings to the table.
Our top tier, tier 1A, which is mid to plus starter guys that can either be a quality player or has the capability of ascending into being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Cam Ward was placed in this category. He has the rare improvisational skills. He has this cool, calm demeanor, but more importantly, his arm has so much pop in it, and that has enabled him to create some crazy, nutty, highlight level plays. I feel pretty comfortable separating him and Sheduer Sanders. I think that everybody is on that same page that there should be a separation. Cam Ward can be Jordan Love, Patrick Mahomes level good. He just needs a little bit of time. And I think that that's where he's been a bit mischaracterized, that everybody assumes he's going to step in right away and be incredibly dominant. This is probably going to be a couple-year process, but he is worth banking on and gambling on that upside that he brings to the table.
I think year one in the NFL is not going to tell the true story of Cam Ward because, like you said, Joe, I don't think that he's a high floor player. I think he's a high ceiling player, which brings a little bit of volatility. He's a slightly, I'm going to say slightly, he's a boomer bust player, right? Like there is a world where Cam Ward is a top 7 quarterback in the NFL. There's also a world where he kind of flames out. Like both those things are kind of on the table for him. He is a volatile prospect. But if we're doing the most likely outcomes or the outcomes that we think can hit if he's in the right situation, that's more how you're projecting forward. I think that he has all the upside in the world, man. Like he's been a kid that is 6'2", 220 plus, strong arm, really creative outside of structure, makes some of the biggest throws in this class, most special throws in this class. But I think the one thing that we talk about, Joe, and this is me kind of just taking everything into account, is that this was a young man who only had one scholarship offer coming out of high school, right? It was a 0-star recruit. This was a kid that had to go and play Pac-12 football at Washington State and prove himself after a pretty pedestrian first year, got a ton better in 2023. And this was another kid again who had now to go to the ACC and play at Miami and once again show that he belongs. I think that that long road that he has had is actually going to set him up really well for the long term because that stuff matters so much. These players, a lot of times, have been the guy for so long, and then once they have a little bit of doubts, once they have a little bit of some obstacles to work through as a rookie and to try to maneuver and evaluate them properly, they fall and they falter because they're not used to failure. They're not used to proving themselves. They're not used to proving people wrong. I do think that that part of Cam Ward's game, on top of the physical profile, is why I do believe in him in this class and why I would draft him in the top 10 and potentially think about him with the first overall selection of the Tennessee Titans. Because I do think that background, him wanting to prove himself and him consistently proving people wrong, I think that is good for the initial because there's going to be some lumps. There's going to be some tough times as a rookie for the Tennessee Titans, but if he maneuvers it well enough and he keeps his profile and he keeps his head on his shoulders the way he has during the course of his career, I think this is a player that's going to be better for it on the other side, and those physical traits can really start to take over for Cam Ward on the NFL level.
Folks, let us know in the comments below. What do you think of our top 10 quarterbacks? Did we miss anybody? Do you think we're too high or too low on someone? Let us know below. Hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe. We'll talk to you later.